Justice is supposed to be blind. I think we have confused blindness with discretion. A blind system should not care who stands before it. It should not become harsher because the judge hates you, softer because he understands you, more forgiving because you are sympathetic, or less patient because you are not. The face should be irrelevant. The argument belongs earlier. What is the crime? What constitutes it? What evidence is sufficient? What consequence follows? What exceptions are legitimate? Those are political questions. Society should fight over them in debate, legislation, courtrooms, and elections. Mercy belongs there. So does severity. But eventually, the argument must end. The machine has to turn. Mechanical justice does not mean removing judges. Judges can still judge. Prosecutors can still argue their cases. Juries can still determine guilt. Individual cases still contain uncertainty, intent, circumstance, evidence, mitigation, and human judgment. Mechanical justice begins later. Perhaps one crime does not meet the threshold. Perhaps a severe sentence does not meet the threshold. Perhaps accumulation does. Repeated convictions, repeated violence, repeated recidivism, repeated return to the same behavior after punishment. At some point, the system is no longer looking at an isolated offense. It is looking at a pattern. A person has repeatedly appeared before the system. He has repeatedly been judged, repeatedly punished, repeatedly returned. At some point, the law should already know what enough means. The official should not say, "I have had enough of this man." The system should say, "This predefined threshold has been crossed." That is where mechanical justice begins. Before the threshold, ordinary justice remains. After the threshold, accumulated conduct becomes part of the judgment. This is threshold forfeiture. The person has not stopped being human, but perhaps individualized mercy should not remain infinite. If a person repeatedly refuses to show his humanity through his conduct, perhaps humanity eventually becomes less relevant to his sentencing. That cannot depend upon one judge becoming disgusted. The threshold has to exist before the person arrives. The law establishes it. The court determines whether it has been crossed. The consequence follows, not because machines are moral, because humans are inconsistent. We carry prejudice, sympathy, disgust, fear, politics, anger. The same conduct passes through two different minds and somehow acquires two different weights. Then justice is no longer blind. It has learned to recognize faces. People usually imagine discretion from the position of the sympathetic defendant. I imagine it from the position of the hated one. The person everyone despises. The person nobody wants to understand. The person whose face makes mercy disappear. The same discretion that allows compassion allows cruelty. I would rather know the weight before placing my hand on the scale. Predictability is its own form of restraint. The state tells you beforehand what it will do. Then it does what it said. No surprise. No improvisation. No appetite. Mechanical justice does not mean maximum punishment. The system can be lenient. It can contain defenses, graduated consequences, age distinctions, evidentiary protections, narrow exceptions, and appeals for factual error. The essential thing is that these exist before the person's identity begins changing how the system feels about him. If a punishment is excessive, change the punishment. If the threshold is unreasonable, change the threshold. If an exception occurs often enough to deserve recognition, write the exception into the system. Do not build a rigid law and then quietly depend upon benevolent officials to make it humane. That is not a principle. That is permission. Permission changes with the person granting it. The compassionate judge eventually leaves the bench. The restrained prosecutor eventually retires. The decent officer eventually dies. I've given up on designing systems that require exceptional people to remain functional. Most people are ritual cogs. Civilizations cannot require every operator to understand the entire machine. The ritual cog should be able to continue the system without possessing enough discretionary power to destroy it through ignorance, weakness, prejudice, sentiment, or ambition. The mechanism has to survive the operator. That is what I mean by moving judgment upstream. Society judges the rule. The court judges the fact. The threshold judges the pattern. The sentence follows. Appeal still has a place, but appeal should correct error, not quietly recreate personal mercy after the threshold has been crossed. There is a difference between saying, "I did not cross the threshold," and saying, "I crossed it but make an exception for me." The first challenge is classification. The second asks the system to recognize the face again. Mechanical justice should correct the first. It should be much more suspicious of the second. There is still a human being inside the mechanism. That cannot be forgotten. We should never forget the value of each individual person when assessing whether losing. That person is worth the cost. That value belongs inside the construction of the rule. What level of certainty is required? What conduct is enough? How much repeated conduct is enough? What protections remain? What exceptions deserve to exist? Ask those questions before we know the person's name. Do not suddenly discover humanity only after the defendant becomes sympathetic. Do not suddenly forget humanity because the defendant becomes hated. If compassion is a principle, write compassion into the law. If age changes culpability, write age into the law. If coercion changes responsibility, write coercion into the law. If repeated criminality changes, the relationship between the individual and the civic order, define when that change occurs. The judge does not become more powerful under mechanical justice. He becomes less powerful. He cannot increase the consequence because he hates you. He cannot reduce it because he identifies with you. He does not decide what you deserve according to his soul. He determines whether the system has been lawfully engaged. Mechanical justice is therefore not simply stronger state power. It is weaker operators. The rule carries more authority. The individual official carries less. That also changes responsibility. If the punishment is monstrous, society wrote it. If the punishment is weak, society wrote it. If the threshold is foolish, society wrote it. Change the law. Do not hide the political decision inside discretionary officials and then pretend nobody designed the outcome. The legislature writes. The prosecutor chooses. The judge adjusts. The institution reviews. The public complains. Responsibility becomes distributed until nobody owns the result. Mechanical justice should force the political order to own what it commands. Write what you mean what you write, then apply it. Justice may need compassion. It may need severity. It may need forgiveness. It may need exceptions. But if these are truly principles of justice, then they should be principles before we know the name of the person asking for them. Otherwise, the blindfold is decoration.